Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Lost Sheep Podcast. My name is Cole Bissett, and I'm joined here today by
Evan Abear
and
Nazario Pangallo.
All right, welcome back to another week, another episode. This is a special week. Would you mind telling us why it's a special week? Evan, Nazario, who wants to? Anybody?
Well, there's certain numbers in the system of numbers that are special, and sometimes we shout them out. We always say what number it is, but this is a very special one. It is 50, episode number 50, and that to us is very, very special because when you set out to, create anything, it's one of the hardest things to do is to stay consistent and to keep on doing it and to keep pushing. And we've seen some growth in our channel, in our Instagram, all those different things. But it is not, the craziest growth you've ever seen in your life. So it really takes a lot to, come back here day in, day out. But we're just very thankful to be able to come to episode 50, knowing that we have people out there who are actually listening to us and have been through a good amount of our episodes and have gained, some knowledge from us and been able to connect with us through this podcast, which is very special. So episode 50, very special day. Evan, how many episodes? Do you know how many episodes you've been on?
No, I was just thinking about
Yeah,
that because I think the first one that I was on with just me may have been like 32. Or 30.
If we think about it, we've
something.
been pretty consistent for the second semester.
Yeah,
which has been 16 weeks, right around that number.
This is week 16.
Yeah,
so I think we've recorded once a week for this whole semester, and the weeks we haven't, we've doubled up or something like that, right? Because I know like spring break, we obviously had the whole. We had the whole vlogging incident, and so we didn't record for spring break.
Somebody did.
But I think we've been really consistent. So taking that pattern, I want to say that I think it was like 32 or something that I was on, because I feel super blessed to have joined this semester. Obviously I haven't been here for all 50 episodes, but just in the time I have been here, just such a cool opportunity, such a cool blessing. It's super exciting to get to talk to people about it now. I was talking to Taylor the other day, who was on the Shepherd of the Week section the other week, and I think we always talk about outside the pod, we're always like, who would be a good guest? Who would be a good guest? He would be such a good guest, and we could up our cuteness factor with Cana and Joseph.
That'd be awesome. Holy cow,
but
that's a good idea.
It's really cool to tell people that we're on episode 50 because that feels substantial. And like you talked about, sometimes we can look at the growth as a whole, and in a world that's so big now, and in an internet that's so big, we can really get caught up in that whole there's not an M behind our followers, and that's, I don't think, to be expected at this point, right? But also, the progress we have done is super cool, and it's super, super exciting to see. So really hyped. And we'll have to get a cake for next episode. Of course, we'll all be at home.
A virtual cake. Every one of us can have
we can all have like a little
house.
cupcake or bun cake or something and blow out our 50 candles. So, yeah. Anyway.
But, yeah, it's been a really exciting opportunity. This has been awesome. I remember when Nazario and I were first coming up with this idea of this podcast, we had originally came up with it before we really even met each other. I believe this was a throw out idea. This was after we had just started texting, and we're like, okay, this is when we're going to be roommates. And I was like, are you going to be a news media major?
Which we often don't discuss that. I know we have discussed it, but we don't discuss God's will in putting you two together as roommates.
It's crazy.
Worst decision. Well, I'm going to shout out God here. Worst decision ever. But super cool fruit out of that. So
yeah, you hear horror stories all the time about roommates, and ours just was not that way. It was very easy, and literally he was like, yeah, I'm gonna do sports broadcasting. I was like, oh, sick. So I was like, you'd be a good podcast person, right? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, awesome. I've been wanting to do a podcast with somebody for a while now. And I was like, and this is a perfect opportunity because he's stuck in a dorm with me.
I will also say the thumbnails since I have joined have gotten better, because I remember a little bit nostalgic if you've been listening since episode 1. The very first episode, the thumbnail is just y'all like shaking hands across the dorm room table.
It's perfect.
But when you open the YouTube, like, you know how it sorts it, like oldest to youngest, basically. It's always the first tile I see, and I like laugh a little bit. It's just funny. But yeah,
dude, I was so motivated to change our thumbnails at one point, and I did eventually, and I stuck with it because I was like, I looked at Nazario and I said, Nazario, our covers suck. And I was like, they're pretty terrible. And I was like, I'm just gonna like go to Canva and use a template, and I've used the same template ever since, and we've had some pretty iconic thumbnails come up, honestly.
Bang.
But
bang.
Yeah, and so another funny story is I remember sitting down and the two of us trying to figure out what in the world we were going to name this. And we were just like, okay, it has to be a parable. Like, I feel like a parable title just works. And so we went through it. We were
Cole was way more of the idea guy at the beginning of this podcast.
Yes,
a little bit more zeal over there at the beginning from Cole.
And I feel like it's balanced out a little bit more nowadays. But yeah, I was pretty motivated when we first started. And I was like, okay, what about like the mustard seed? Could we do anything with that? You know, like, where can we go with this? And all of a sudden, the idea of the lost sheep just came to fruition. And so we recorded, I would say, consistently for the first little bit. And then
2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, no, I think we made about 7 or 8 weeks in. And then we would be like spotty, miss a week or so. And then we would get back into it. And summer came along, and that was a little bit harder for both of us, but it'll be easier now since there's 3 of us. And then
this will be the second Lost Sheep summer.
Yes.
Right. So yeah. So we will be better. And
on a consistency basis, if we do it as we have been doing, episode 100 will be next spring, sometime next spring. So,
there's
cheers to that.
There's 52 weeks in the year, so it'll be the third weekend of April? This is the fourth weekend of April. No.
Yeah.
It's not possible. It's the 26th today. So this is the third weekend of April.
So if we don't miss a single
or something
episode,
like that.
So we essentially don't have to miss.
It'll be the beginning of April that we film our 100th episode. So anyway.
So before he graduates, we need to be consistent about that. That's
100.
our goal, is to continue to film.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is how everything, came to be. Evan came on his first episode, and it was a really good episode. It actually is one of our most viewed episodes. I believe it's right under Father Mugaga's,
which,
it wasn't even on. So
I'm happy with not being.
Actually, you had 2 guest appearances, so.
Well, yeah.
You did.
Yeah,
you did.
So, well.
And then Evan was like, so do I need to sign like a contract or something? And we were like, yeah, let's just hop on. And so we did not actually put together a contract, but Evan came on the episode, and he's been here ever since then.
What are you talking about? He doesn't know about the contract?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's bad.
Yeah,
That's
there
bad
is
news.
some.
Take that over to legal real fast.
Yeah.
No, I love because I was sitting there at home because y'all texted me over the break about potentially coming on the podcast, and I remember getting that text, and I was like, I kind of told my mom, and it's still something that they my parents know I do, and I share episodes with them and stuff, but at the beginning they were kind of confused when I said I was gonna be on a podcast, and my mom was kind of like, what do you mean you're gonna be on you're gonna be on a pod, somebody asked you to be on a podcast? And I was like, no, I'm gonna, two of my disciples and I are we're gonna start hosting a podcast. They asked me to help them out with it. She was like, oh, okay, but super excited that I said yes, and it's come to this. So
I'm curious what your first, because we've heard your first thoughts of getting on the podcast. So I'm curious what yours are.
Yeah, what?
I've never heard
how did he approach you with this?
We kind of always talked about it throughout, as Cole talked about since we first met about doing it. And then our freshman year when we went back home for Christmas break, I had asked for a podcast studio equipment so that I could do my own podcast, whether it be for sports. And then when we came back, I had the equipment with me, and I was just like, all right, cool, let's do this.
That
like,
jump started it.
I got
Yeah.
the equipment. There's no excuses now. And basically we started like that. That's kind of how it went for me.
Yeah.
But to go back on Cole having way more zeal at the beginning, he would be the one kind of doing everything, to be honest, literally everything. And as he said, it's balanced out. And that's how we're going to get into our quote, because I had been bringing quotes for a good amount of the recent weeks, but actually none of us brought the quote for today. This is, ladies and gentlemen, from the one and only ChatGPT. So you can have an account on ChatGPT if you didn't know, where the algorithm kind of, I guess, knows you a little bit, like knows what you've looked up and kind of it remembers things that you've looked up before. And so I have used ChatGPT a little bit for the podcast, whether it be for title ideas, description ideas. But this is the first time that we decided to use it for a quote idea. So it knows our podcast a little bit. It knows what we're trying to do. And so it gave us a pretty cool quote that we're kind of pretty excited about.
And just to add a little bit more like gravity to this whole thing, is that the right word? Like, is that like
Gravity? Is that what you said?
brevity? Brevity.
Yeah.
There it is. Gosh,
Yeah.
so close. To add a little bit more brevity to this, we did this 5 minutes ago for the sole purpose that we would have no idea what we were going to talk about. So this is what we're trying to do with episode 50. We're trying to make it special, and we kind of want to just come up with this on the fly and see how it goes, and just let the Holy Spirit guide this conversation. So yeah, Nazario, didn't want to cut you off there, but I just wanted to preface that before we went forward. But go ahead, you can go.
So our quote for today, for episode 50, if there is no God, everything is permissible. Evan, that is by Fyodor
Dostoevsky. And
Dostoevsky.
If
That's it, right?
Dostoevsky, if I've butchered his name, I apologize.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Evan, do you want to give us a little background on him? I know you did a little research on it. So.
So he was a Russian novelist and essayist from the late 1800s. What's really cool about this is we looked at ChatGPT 5 minutes before this episode, and we kind of had, I think it was 5 quotes, and we're looking through the quotes, and we pulled out 3 of them. Cole and I pulled out 3 of them, and I had one I liked, Cole had one I liked, and this one we were kind of like, okay, that one's kind of cool. So we both kind of agreed on it. And I turned to Cole and I go, who's the author? And he goes, Fyodor. And I was like, Dostoevsky. And he was like, yeah. But what's really cool about this, and this will come into the episode a little bit later, is one of our very good friends here, or one of my very good friends here at Bama Catholic, who unfortunately recently passed away. Malachi Crane was a very big reader of Fyodor Dostoevsky. And so I remember this comes from the Arazaman brothers is the book that this comes from. But he has a series of essays that's kind of like the entry into existentialist literature. That's his point.
Do you want to give a quick Cole definition of existentialism?
Literature.
Yeah, you can continue as I look.
But he has a book, and it's now escaping me. But it's a series of essays, a series of short stories. And so last spring break, when we were going up to New Hampshire to visit a buddy's house, I remember looking over in the plane, and Malachi was sitting next to me, and he had one of Fyodor Dostoevsky's books open, and he was reading it. So super God's grace that we were able to discuss this today. And this was the quote that ChatGPT spit out on us, besides my despite my hatred for the AI. So actually getting into the quote, I think you want to define existentialism.
Yeah, I can, which actually I think is gives more reason as to why he would say this quote. But existentialist literature explores themes of meaninglessness, individual responsibility, in the search for purpose in a world without inherent meaning. And the book that you had quoted originally was the Brothers Karamazov, or Crime and Punishment is his most famous work, if you've probably heard of that one before.
Yeah. Quote, if there is no God, everything is permissible, not possible. Everything is permissible. And I think, we've been talking a lot recently about morality and kind of this aspect of our human role in our morality. And I think we can go deeper here. Last week we talked about moral authority and the actions we take in relation to our faith, in relation to what we believe. We've been reading Mere Christianity on and off, and I think in the first 6 or 7 chapters that we're through, kind of been interrupted, but in the first 6 or 7 chapters that we're through, C.S. Lewis has done a very good job of kind of getting into this idea that there is a moral law or moral code of some manner that exists in the world that humans are striving to uphold. And so I think if we take that view, right, of the C.S. Lewis, there has to be a moral code because we intrinsically believe that there are things that are right and wrong. Then even if you don't believe in God or a God or gods, then there still is that moral compass, that signpost that tells you right from wrong. Because there are things that everyone, or at least infinitesimal 9% of the population agree on as right and wrong, right? Like, murder or physical violence to the extreme, or any of these things, right? Like, you could probably ask 9 out of 10 people, and every single time they're going to say, like, yeah, that's wrong. So my first thought here is immediately throwing out the part of if there is no God, and just looking at the everything is permissible, and why that kind of shouts to me. So,
okay, I like that. I love that you brought up Mere Christianity, because I think the first 7 or 8 chapters that we've read it literally is an embodiment of this quote. I think it's accompanying how to explain this quote, honestly. And so my first initial thought, whenever I hear
more of a refutation.
Can you define refutation for me?
Like, he's refuting it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so my first thoughts here is to talk about natural law. Right? I think that's where I want to go. Is the concept of natural law, is the existence of natural law in itself a proof of the existence of God? That's my first question for you guys. And what do y'all think about that? And what also, if you wouldn't mind explaining to the viewers what natural law is. I know that's a deeper one, but this is what we've talked about.
Question where he uses a word and then asks us to explain what his term is. I think also, let's be just mindful for a second. We are not deep theologians.
No.
So let's try to keep this, approachable.
A lot of our knowledge from this probably is going to be pulled from Mere Christianity because it's very recent.
Do you want to shoot?
I think I can give the reason why the natural law proves God, or at least some form of a divine being. But trying to think of a natural law definition, do you think you have that?
Can you get Cole while we're doing this? While we're discussing this question you posed us, can you pull up USCC C or something like that?
Natural law definition.
Yeah. So when you think about just the inherent consciousness that human beings have, I'll go with that as the words. And you think about someone that does something, and Cole and I tried to get Cole to talk about this movie on the podcast today, and I'm going to bring it in myself. But I went and saw Revenge of the Sith last night, a rescreening.
Banger. Yeah.
And
did you see that place that Hayden Christensen and Samuel Jackson showed up to? Like they went to a rescreening? They showed up to like a random movie theater somewhere.
He had like a special thing that he said before the movie. It was super cool. And I think this movie shows one great aspect of it. And you see multiple times when Anakin is really dealing with, right and wrong. When he has the Jedi code as his kind of moral compass that he's trying to follow. And you see when he's holding the lightsabers around the neck of Count Dooku, where he's really questioning what's right, what's wrong.
He's on that seesaw, yeah.
Yeah, and we can. I'm not saying that Jedi code or anything like that has anything to do with this, but just what it means as a human being to see someone that you can tell, hey, they know right and wrong, and that comes from our inherent consciousness of we know ending a life is something very serious. Mm-hmm. We know that we probably shouldn't do it except for very real reasons of self-defense. And that's where I get the perfect comparison. And you really feel that relatability when you watch that part of the movie. And you say, okay, I understand this time where We don't exactly maybe have a Catholic teaching or biblical teaching on this specific thing that is happening, but we still know, okay, I can feel in myself this consciousness of, hey, I don't know if this is right. I don't know if I should be doing this.
Yeah.
And that's where we get the reasons for God, because, like I said, there may not be a specific Catholic or biblical teaching on this specific subject. There's a lot of things that weren't specifically talked about in the Bible, or the Catechism doesn't have something on it. But we still have this feeling in us of, hey, is this right or wrong? We're not just like, oh, the church doesn't teach about this. I mean, I can just do whatever I want. No, we have a deliberation that we kind of go through, deciding, is this right or wrong? Where does that come from? And to me, and you guys can give better reasoning for it, but for sure I believe that comes from a divine being that has given us this moral law, this natural law.
Well, so who's Joe Rogan's person that he like shouts to, or like Pat
Jamie?
McAfee has one too? Who's Pat's?
For definitions, or
for,
what are you talking about?
They'll be on and they'll be like,
there's a guy on Pat
do
McAfee
this
shows.
like we need this pulled up on the screens or whatever, right? It's like I was watching about draft the other day, and they were like pull up Shadur waiting, and it was literally like, all 6 of them, and then randomly Shadur pops up waiting.
On the explanation right there, how are we feeling about that? Was that solid
Yeah,
explanation?
no, I like that. I think I'm just gonna add to it a little bit, right? Because what I was gonna say is simply in now less than a week, in 6 days, thank God, praise be, I will officially graduate with my undergraduate degree from the University of Alabama.
Biology major.
Bio major. Mm-hmm. But that keys into this. I'm super hyped. I'm super hyped for commencement. But what I was going to say is, I often have this conversation with Sam Somprek, who we've had on the podcast before.
Just 2 weeks ago.
Just 2 weeks ago. That,
or three from when you guys will be seeing this.
Yeah, that more you dive into science, more it proves Christ, right? And so when you look at all of these, whether it be Eucharistic miracles, whether it be the veil of Veronica, I forget what the actual name is whether you look at like they found burial cloths, right?
The Shroud of Turin, is that
Shroud of Turin? Yes.
Yeah.
My favorite one of all time, and this is why I said it first, is Eucharistic miracles. And the favorite aspect of that for me is that every time they've tested anything scientifically, and this isn't like some guys in somebody's classroom doing this. This is like analytical scientists, very highly trained. But every time they test a Eucharistic miracle for DNA and blood typing and all of that, it's always like an early 1st century Arabic man, and the blood type is always the same. And I'm not sure on this one, right? So I'm going to put my check here, but I'm pretty sure like they've gone down to like the markers on the blood, because you know how you can be like type A, and you can have an A and an O, right? Recessive and dominant genes. And it's like down to the markers being the same. Super cool stuff. And so
Jesus also, we believe this is Jesus, his blood that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And it is also the universal blood donor blood type he has, which is super cool.
I think another thing they were able to pull, I had no idea how this is even like humanly possible, but they were able to tell it had been from a man who had been severely wounded.
Yeah. So
I remember hearing about that as
your
well, which is super
cool. Your body releases different hormones and chemicals and things, right? And so when you're in extreme stress, your body releases epinephrine and norepinephrine and all these different hormones. And I'm pretty sure that's what I read is like when they go in and they look at this blood, they can see stress hormones, and they can see like his body literally being stressed out. But my point is like every time you dive into these miracles, the science proves that this is real, that this is true. And so as you go deeper into science, it kind of begins to prove itself. And so one of the coolest courses I've taken this semester has been evolution. And, I know we'll have an evolution podcast episode one time.
That'll be something.
Because it would be something, yeah, for sure. But one of the things I will say is like, there's certain things where like, they'll, scientists will be like, okay, we've pretty much done all we can, but like there's still this question that we can't answer. But like, we know we have the technology, but like we can't really, like we can't figure out how to do it. And I'm like, maybe there's a reason. But my coolest thing is there's this theory of evolution called the primordial goo, basically, theory of evolution. And the basic premise is that at the beginning of all time, there was this like goo, this collection of nutrients and materials and atoms and things. And life began from that, right? Basic single cell organisms, and then evolved until we're at current form. But what I love about that is like, that's the assumption that like there's been no guidance whatsoever. And also B, that like we've ended up in our current form with our morality, with agreeing these things, right and wrong, like these general premises that we talk about of, like, let's take murder, right? Like of believing that murder is wrong. Like everyone has agreed with that. You ask, atheists, you ask people who believe in God, you ask people who are in other religion, like, pantheistic religions or, whatever, right? And you'll ask them and, is murder wrong? And they'll say yes. And so it's very compelling to me, the evidence of some sort of superior natural law put forth by a deistic figure when you break down like the simple statistics, the math, the science of of where we are as a human race in our morality, in our psychology, and how we interact with the world. Even down to, we talk about stewardship a lot, right? And unless you're kind of in the 20th century, in the 21st century, unless you're kind of like an unfeeling, uncaring person, one of your primary concerns should be for the environment. I think that's something that most of the world agrees on. Mm-hmm. And so, down to that, like Genesis day 6, God creates man. He says, go, be stewards of the earth, right? That's not a mistake, right? That God has told us to do this, and now we are seeking to actively do that.
Add on to the stewardship part in terms of just humanity, and even with like normal animals, you see like a little bit of this with like a mother bear and how she cares for her children. But C.S. Lewis talked about this in Mere Christianity as well. Your moral compass doesn't just say like, okay, do whatever is best for myself so that I can survive. It doesn't say that.
Yeah.
Which is a very interesting thing, because if you're just an animal, or if you're just another organism that has developed and evolved on this journey of evolving and continuing to evolve without like any God whatsoever, no guidance, no purpose, then why would you do that? If you see someone drowning in a river, you're not going to run away unless some people
right, yeah,
may, but most people
swim, right?
Most people will at least feel this pull to, hey, I need to go jump in there and help this person or save this person in some way. Even if it's a running current, even if it's pouring down rain, you're not just gonna depart, or what is the word I'm looking for? Abandon this person. Yeah. You're going to try to save them. Why is that? Stewardship. Why do you have that? Natural law.
So I have a really cool, y'all are gonna love this. So there's actual biological evidence that altruism is true altruism is only experienced in humans.
Cole, define altruism?
Pretty close. That's what you're discussing, like sacrificing for another, right? Good at the expense of another. And so in nature, right, when you talk about altruism, whether you talk about like parental care or ants where they are in like a tribe, hive thing, right? Whatever it is you're talking about, it's kind of been explained genetically by a theory called the sexy son hypothesis, which basically states that like I'm more fit if my offspring are more fit, right? So basically like if my lineage is great, that makes me more attractive as a potential mate. But also like if I can prove that I can, successfully reproduce and be strong and live in this environment, then I have more of a chance of doing that again. So it's similar to like, I liken this to Super Bowl winning teams. Okay, so two things can happen on a Super Bowl winning team. You win the Super Bowl and your entire team disbands, and you're not competitive at all. We see this with the Eagles before they won the Super Bowl. What was that? 2013?
They last won 2017.
Yeah. So
against the Patriots.
They had kind of this scrap together year, and then the next year
they literally had their backup quarterback win Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah. And then the next year just, non-existence, right? Or the alternate theory is that you win the Super Bowl and people see that and they want to join you, right? They notice that your fitness is really good, and so they like attach themselves to you. We see this with the Chiefs, right? First year they won the Super Bowl, they were good. Don't get me wrong, they were good. But then the next year they added some more pieces. And they competed and they won again, right? And so, in humans, like, we exhibit this altruism that's completely detestable of ourselves, right? Meaning that we have no care for ourselves, like you said, like jumping into the river. It doesn't do anything for us. There's no sure reward. There's no reason. There's no benefit. But we only do it at the expense of ourselves and for the gain of the other. So super, super interesting. And again, super compelling that, like, we're altruistic beings. Like, in our true goodness, we are altruistic, and we can really put down those thoughts of like, hey, this doesn't help me at all, right? And again, one of those things that like society says is kind of, kind of bad. Like, if you're an inherently selfish person, somebody's probably going to look at you and be like, hey man, you really are kind of a prick. Like, you're a selfish guy, and again, but where does that come from? Yeah, that natural law that we talk about.
Yeah, and to go back to the quote, if you think about, I'm going to go with a real world example of wars, and specifically go back to World War II. If you think about, if there is no God, everything is permissible. And going back to what you're talking about with altruism, when you think about America, we talk about the golden generation, what do they say? I think it's the golden generation.
The golden age?
Well,
what are you talking about?
The greatest generation, or I forget exactly what they call it, but basically
that's a nickname for boomers.
Before boomers, right? The World War II soldiers, and
the forgotten generation.
Okay,
I think, or something like
might
that.
Be misplacing the term.
Anyway,
what I'm trying to go with here is, why do people look back on all these people that fought in World War II or any type of soldiers? And especially with World War II, specifically going against like the Nazis, and for America going against the Japanese, they think of just these absolute selfless characters, especially when you think about D-Day, literally just throwing yourself out there, knowing more than likely, I'm probably not surviving this, but I'm just going to go and sacrifice myself so that maybe the guy behind me can make it. And we think about how incredible that is. As you said, there's nothing that these soldiers are good they're getting out of this except dying and hoping that if they have salvation, they go to heaven. But why do they do it? All of those people did it for each other and for freedom. And why do we care about that at all? Why do we care about helping somebody else? Altruism. But then we see a real world example of the quote, if there is no God, everything is permissible, with Soviet Russia, one of the countries in that war. And kind of a little bit with communism, especially when it becomes completely corrupted. It's the greater good. For anything is permissible for the greater good. And Soviets had completely denounced God. So they literally, whatever we think is best for the greater good, we can do. And that went to the extreme of literally killing their own citizens because they thought, oh, this is for the greater good of the country. We're running out of food. We kill people. Then we can spread the food around to more people. Less people will be starving and hungry. And so this is, I think, a real world example of how this can become extremely deadly, this quote, if there is no God, everything is permissible. If everything is permissible without this natural law. Because, believe it or not, you can really destroy your natural law if you really try to. Obviously, we hope that it stays there and your consciousness is there. But if you continue to go against your natural law, as you talk about a lot with like the brain and how it works, it's just going to be trained that, oh, this thing may come up in our mind, but we don't care about it. It doesn't matter to us. And that's what happens if you continue to go against the natural law so consistently and never repent or go back. You're going to kill it where you become so evil where everything is permissible.
So
If you think that it is okay.
Yeah, Cole, you've been waiting very patiently.
Yeah.
yeah,
So-
I've just been listening.
So
It's
shoot.
okay.
He's got like 16 definitions pulled up on his
no
phone.
definitions actually. at
No
all.
definition? That's like okay, anyway.
Yeah. Real quick thing. I
Is he
just
going
making
to ask
sure
you
I'm
another
getting this-
question?
No. Yeah. Well, just making sure I'm getting this. Are both of y'all disagreeing with this?
No.
With the quote?
Yeah. Sounds like you are.
If there is no
Are
God.
you disagreeing with
No,
this?
no, no. I'm not disagreeing at all.
Okay.
Well, I'm just saying if someone were to follow, like if there is no God, everything is permissible, I think that if you follow it, that's a road to just complete evil.
So you
Like
think
if the world was governed by if there is no God, everything is permissible, which the secular world kind of is in a way.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
For me,
I agree completely with the quote with what it is saying.
this is kind. Well, sorry, that was a bit closer than I thought. This is kind of where my mind is going with this. I think natural law and God have a direct relationship with each other. I think if God exists, natural law exists. If God didn't exist, natural law would cease to exist, right? I think we would lose that aspect. And so here's the order I want to give, right? God's existence, he's outside of time, so God's always been there, right? God is God. God is life. God is love. God is everything, right? And so
God
which-
is everything would be. I'm not sure
I'm
that's
not, yeah, I'm not sure about
100%
that one,
correct.
but keep going. Keep
Anyways, and so next thing we have is we're created with free will. All right, and what comes with that? Morality and natural law is born, right? And so I want to give this quote from C.S. Lewis. This is actually from Mere Christianity. So men became scientific because they expected law in nature, and they expected law in nature because they believed in a lawgiver. Right? And this goes back to what you were saying earlier, right? The fact that there is a natural law, the fact that this exists it is a proof in itself that there must be some higher power for there to be this law in existence, right? Like none of us, not a single one of us laid out this morality. Not a single one of us laid out this natural law, right? Somebody else had to do that. Well, if somebody else had to do that and it wasn't somebody who's human, then who in the world did it? Right? And so in of itself, it's a proof in some sort of higher power, right? And so I find it so fascinating because I think I agree with this quote in a sense. I don't think it's a motto or anything, but I think it's a statement, and I think it's true. Like if God didn't exist, right, and there was free will wasn't given to us, well, again, we would probably not be created. We wouldn't be created, but theoretically, if there was no God, we existed somehow, right? And morality was taken away, free will was taken away, natural law would cease to exist. We wouldn't be able to discern what's good for us and what's not good for us, and whether an action is neutral or anything, where everything would be neutral. Neutrality would exist, right? And so everything would be permissible at that point, right? Because higher power in actions would cease to exist. It would all be neutral. Right? Murder could be seen as just anything. It's just something that happens. It's neither good nor bad, right? God's existence, that's what makes life so beautiful. That's what gives us purpose, right? The purpose of our life is to choose God continually. What?
You're making me laugh, dude. This is so funny.
Well, what's going on?
Are you noticing it?
Hmm.
Literally every time Cole his pause every time is right, and
I hate
he
that I do
goes
that.
down into it and he bounces
Right.
off of it every time.
Right.
It's making me laugh.
It's a
right
good
now.
it's a good transition for me. But no, I'm gonna notice.
Yeah,
that.
he's gonna
Okay.
be. This is gonna be challenging for him to talk for the rest of the episode. I couldn't stop. Like I was noticing it, and I just started laughing. I couldn't help it.
But I'm gonna break the habit. But the purpose of our life and the beauty of our life is given to us by our free will, because we are continually choosing to follow God each and every day. Almost did it right there. I was so close. And if God ceased to exist, if free will wasn't there, if morality wasn't there, our own identity, our purpose that we talked about last week would change. Everything would cease to exist. Our purpose, our will to live would not exist. And
Yeah.
so that's why I think as a blanket statement, it's just a statement surface level, right? I don't think this is a motto we should live by, right? Because we can't.
And
I did it.
As Fyodor, as an Eastern Orthodox Christian, I don't believe he meant this as a motto in any way.
No, I don't
either.
think so
I
either.
think he probably meant it as a warning
Yeah.
to the world.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So that's just the way my mind goes with it. I think it's a really interesting thing for us to talk about because I think it dives into morality on a less talked about view. And, I don't feel like we go into natural law a whole lot, like in life. Like we talk about morality, we talk about free will, but I don't think we actually go into the fact, okay, what if we just existed and God wasn't here? Which, again, it would be like, that's impossible, right? And it would establish, and that's really going to get in my head.
It's kind of like physicists talking about gravity, though.
Yeah.
Explain. Make your analogy.
For Christians, we just understand a natural law as being there.
Yeah.
Like physicists just understand gravity to be there. And so it's not something you have to think about or decipher. Like, you don't come together and you discuss things that you understand inherently. And so I think it's kind of that similar point of like, if you understand it and you accept it to be true, then like, it's something that you don't need to really discuss all that much because it's there. It's accepted.
Fair. All right, we are 43 minutes into this episode, so
Good
Good
chatting.
conversation.
I'm
I
excited.
love that one.
I have another great analogy for a wrap up, so I'm
awesome.
hyped.
Awesome,
Yeah.
perfect. Awesome. But Evan, we are moving on to our Shepherd of the Week. Evan, you have technically I thought of doing this person for the Shepherd of the Week, but absolutely you should be the one to introduce him.
Yeah, so our Shepherd of the Week is Malachi Crane, who, as I mentioned before, unfortunately passed away a few weeks ago. Malachi,
3 weeks to the day.
Yeah, 3 weeks to the day. Malachi was a really good friend of mine. I met him my freshman year. He was in Alex's Bible study and just kind of a guy that I'd seen at church and hung around with and stuff like that. Didn't really get to know him really well until my second year at Alabama, and coming into this year, I had been working for him this year and just getting a lot closer. But Malachi, last night we had a memorial mass for him here at Bama Catholic. It was very nice. A lot of people from the community and some of his family members came and things like that. But as a part of it, some people got to get up and tell stories and whatnot about Malachi. And so, and Father Mugaga gave the homily, which was very special to me because in this Easter time, I kind of draw very similar parallels to Christ's final days and Malachi's. Because, Father Mugaga and Malachi and I had our last meal together on a Thursday evening.
And if you guys remember it, the episode that came out, Evan actually talked about this.
You talked about this. That day we recorded.
And so we went out for our last meal on Thursday, and that was the last time we ever saw him. But just such a gift. Like, you talk about people who are gifts to society, and Malachi was truly a person who was a gift to be able to know. His joy, his friendship, his humor, and his sincerity of heart, his truth, and his intelligence. I think one of the things that first kind of connected us was Malachi and I could sit down and have, like a conversation for hours. And I think one of the coolest, one of my coolest stories about Malachi is there was one night that Alex and Malachi and I were sitting by the fire with one of Alex's buddies from back home, and I think we started hanging out like 6:30 or 5:30. We cooked dinner, and we had dinner, and we were drinking whiskey and having some cigars, and we've we'd been discussing like just faith for hours. And I don't think that any of us had contacted our phones or done anything for hours, but we didn't realize. And so finally one of us got up to go to the bathroom and got our phone, and like, you know, we came back down and we're like, dude, it's 1:30 in the morning. And it, you know, he was one of those people that you could get lost in a conversation with easily, and just like forget about everything else because of how intelligent he was and how intentional he was with this conversation, and with his desire to truly know you and to be with you in that moment. And so, yeah, he is our shepherd of the week. I think y'all wanted to share a little bit about him. He's impacted a lot of people's lives very heavily. I think that was a good thing to see yesterday and a good thing for his family to see. But Cole, I know you had a little bit to share.
I think the cool thing about having Malachi as the shepherd of our week was when we came up with the idea of this segment. It was kind of like, okay, who has in this past week or like in our life really affected us in a way that we didn't realize, in a way that it was so moving that it kind of just motivated us to be better people. And I think Malachi truly is an embodiment of what we wanted this segment to look like. And so the cool thing, the interesting thing about my relationship with Malachi is it wasn't a very deep relationship. I had maybe 3 conversations with him throughout the entirety of the time I've been here at Bama Catholic. And what's crazy is he still has had like a huge, profound impact on me. The cool thing about him is that I find so wonderful is so recently I took a trip to the Grand Canyon with Austin and Cole, and Cole is one of Malachi's best friends. And I think getting to see the fruits of Malachi on Cole was really like, I was like, oh my gosh, like I have never seen someone mean so much to a person than what Malachi did to Cole Kelly. Yeah. And I was like, and Cole consistently will credit so much of his faith to Malachi. And I'm like, wow, this person has done wondrous things for people. And it gave me chills just sitting there listening to Cole talk about Malachi yesterday. I was like, wow. Like the first thing, like when I heard about this news, when you had told us about it, I went home and I had called my mom and I said, you know, the craziest thing about this is like, I think Malachi, you know, we talk about through our life about finding our vocation, right? And how difficult it is to discern what our vocation is. And I told my mom and I said, I think the coolest thing about all this is I think Malachi found his vocation in other people, in helping other people, and lived it to the fullest in his life, and has transformed people's lives in a way that they will, like, to this day, we will never understand how he was able to do it as well as he did. Yeah. And so, that's my experience with Malachi. He's an awesome, awesome person, and it is truly wonderful to see how much he is interceding for us already. So.
Yeah, Cole said that he had 3 conversations with Malachi. I think I legitimately only had 1. I only think I talked to him 1 time, and it was when he trained me to be a Eucharistic minister. Mm-hmm. And personally, I have thought that's like one of the most cool things to do, and I didn't really understand how much of a gift it was to be able to minister the Eucharist. So first off, that's just an incredible gift that he's given me through that. I always went to daily mass. I was like, oh, they probably need help. Like I should maybe do this. And then that's when I met him. But super cool to think about how someone's effect on people doesn't stop when they leave this earth. And that is how Malachi has really affected me, and really in these last few days. And I think about the movie It's a Wonderful Life when I'm thinking about this while you guys are talking, and thinking about yesterday. And if you guys have seen that movie, I'm forgetting the main character's name at the moment, but basically he passes away, he dies, just for this angel to show him all the effects that he's had on so many people's lives. And I have no idea if Malachi, if he came down yesterday to watch us and saw all those stories that were being told, whether he would be like, wow, I did all of this, or would he be like, yeah, I did all this. But it's incredible to see what all he did. And although I didn't know him well at all, yesterday I felt like, wow, I know this guy and I want to be as much like this guy as I can possibly be. Because I was thinking like, man, all these people are like, Malachi would just say yes no matter what. You could have a conversation with him and it wouldn't matter. And he would find a way to be just loving to you. And the funniest thing for me was Liam Kelly was telling this story about going bike riding with him. And Liam had never been mountain biking, but Malachi stayed back with him the whole time. And Liam was like so thankful for all the support that he was showing him when the other people that they were with were like going ahead of him, and Malachi was showing him kindness the whole time. And then later he says that Malachi told him that he was so sick of him the whole time, but it didn't matter because Malachi was still able to love Liam and to support him at that time. And Liam had no idea that Malachi might have been the most frustrated person in the world. And so to be that type of friend, and to just have so many people come up and want to tell stories about you and to share the love that he shared with them, super inspirational. So I say, just because someone passed away does not mean that what they've done or their effects stop. And I think that is the lasting memory that I will have from Malachi.
So two things, and I'll launch into our personal prayer.
I want to say one thing after you're done.
Okay, cool.
Quickly. Yeah.
We had Austin on last week, right? And one of the things he said, 2 weeks ago? I keep forgetting.
When this releases.
Yes. 2 weeks ago we had Austin on, and the thing he kept saying is like, as missionaries we're asked a lot, like, how do you get judged? Like, is it by the amount of people you touch? And I think he's right in the fact that you can't be judged by that. But you can like get a benefit. You can get a plus from it, right? And so hearing you talk, what comes to mind is like the butterfly effect, right? I keep seeing Instagram reels on the butterfly effect. Don't tell anybody. I'm on marriage TikTok or marriage Instagram reels right now.
I wonder why.
Yeah. But no, like I keep thinking about this butterfly effect, and there's people who he has not directly impacted, but people who have impacted people who he has impacted through his impact, right? So like you talk about Cole, like the impact that he's had on this community is astounding. Or even me, like Malachi had a profound impact on me. And now I lead a Bible study, and I'm leading y'all in discipleship and things like that, right? So it's not only direct, but it's like, 2, 3 degrees, 4 degrees, right? And that's so special. That's so cool, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to say is I originally I was like, wow, when this had happened, I was like, wow, I talked to Malachi the day before this happened. It was my last conversation with Malachi, and it was the third one, it's crazy to me because I had 3 conversations with Malachi in the entirety of my time here, 2 years. And the last time I spoke to him was the day before he passed. And I was just giving him back an item, and I was talking to him, and I was like, hey man, like I seriously appreciate you like giving me this and letting me use this. And he was like, yeah, dude, no worries. It's not a big deal at all. And I was like, seriously, dude, like I appreciate it. And he like could not stop saying like, it's not a big deal. And the lasting memory, and I truly think I think the fact that this conversation, God allowed this conversation to happen means a lot to me. But the last thing that I will remember from him again, and everybody will continue to say it, is that smile. Like it cannot be understated how much he loved to smile. And he just smiled and laughed and walked away. And it was like truly, I think it was the most beautiful moment that I could have in that memory of Malachi. Yeah. So you want to do the practical prayer practice with that?
Practical prayer practice. And I think this kind of wraps up. We can lead directly into our final thoughts with this, but just live your life with joy. If, it's one thing that I've drawn from Malachi's death and from all of this, it's just that, we need to be joyful. There's no reason not to be. I keep coming on this and being like, there is absolutely no reason why today I can't be the absolutely most joyful I can be. Because not doing that is doing a disservice to everyone who's taught me everything, and doing a disservice to Christ himself, who has literally destroyed sin and death. And so just live your life with joy, and live your life with reckless abandon sometimes, and just love. Yeah. Malachi taught us to love when it hurts, especially. Yeah. So final thoughts, Cole. I'll toss it over to you first. I think probably, maybe, unless you don't have final thoughts.
I think I kind of like covered everything I want to say with it. Just a little summary of what I was getting at. The existence of God, the existence of free will that he's given us. This beautiful gift gives us this natural law. It gives us this purpose. It gives us the ability to know what's good for us and what's not good for us. And that's what makes our life so wonderful. It's the ability for us to choose God and have our own shot at salvation. So, yeah.
As human beings, one of the most important things, I think, to being able to live a great life that is both satisfying, purposeful, and joyful, enjoyable, is the ability to admit that you're not as good as you think you are. The ability to admit that you are humble and that you need so many other things. You are on your own. You're just not good enough. You can't do anything on your own. And when I think about this quote, it's very much talking about if it's lived out, if there is no God, everything is permissible. It is very much the subjective way of life. And that if there is no God, it's not really saying that there is no God if everything is permissible in this way. It's saying, I'm my own God. Whatever I want, I can permiss. And it's very, very subjective, and it is this lifting up of your own self. And through this is when life becomes selfish, as we talked about. It becomes very one-sided, anti-altruistic, however many things you could say. Mm-hmm. And that is where we have to. It's one of the incredible things about confession, one of the incredible things about Christianity. You can't be Christian without realizing how much you need a Savior. You have to realize that you need Jesus. And it's something that I try to think about when I'm thinking about my friends that I know that maybe aren't into their faith. How in the world can I help them? And this is the most miraculous way. It's when someone realizes that they are not enough, that they have failed, and that they need a Savior. And Malachi definitely lets you know that. And I think for me, I realized yesterday, like, okay, maybe I'm not as good of a person as I can be. Like, I don't know if people would go up and tell these stories about them. I was thinking about maybe people just tell stories about how I like to pick on Cole a lot, which does happen quite a bit.
Yeah,
but it makes you think. And
it's reflective.
Yeah. You realize you always can be better and that you are never as good as you can be, right? And you have to have this humble mindset and this objective mindset, not subjective. And that's where I get my final thoughts from the quote. Objective truth, which we get from the Lord. He has the fullness of truth. We do not have the ability to have our own subjective truth. We must receive our objective truth from the Lord.
I think that was pretty cool. I think the first thing we say whenever we get off the episode, we'll stop recording and then we'll all turn to each other and be like, if it was a really good episode, we'll do like, dude, that was a really good episode. And that's what I'm thinking right now. Like, this is such a good episode. And just like such a special way to wrap 50. But what I want to say is, if you're seeking Christ, look to science. So the analogy that I wanted to bring in is, and I kind of took this quote more as like a, proof, less of talking about the natural law and more about, how do we know God exists? Do you know what a phylogenetic tree is? Have y'all seen those things where it's like whales, whatever, like the relatedness of all the animals? Yes. And it kind of is like a chart. Mm-hmm. Okay. So they use computers to generate those, right? Mm-hmm. And you can get them down to like species. But what happens at 13, if you go past 13, of any classification, the project becomes NP hard, which means that we can't compute it. We have to take our best guess at it, right? So like even if we have all this statistical data, 12 animals, your computational, computers are going to be like, oh yeah, cool. Like we can do that. We can give you like the best one. That's probably what happened. But anything past 13 and the computer can only give you possible scenarios. And so NP hard means that it would take all the computers in the world more time than the sun has until it burns out in order for it to complete this task. And I often think about this in relation to God because, if it's a simple task like that, right, where it's, we don't even know how these animals are related to each other, how on earth did a random assortment, a random conglomeration create everything in existence? It's just I thank God each day that like you said, that I realized I needed a savior and realized it's not all about me, because it's a sad life to live when it's all about you. So yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap. For guests, firstly, connect with the Instagram and wherever you listen, leave comments and likes. We love to hear back from y'all feedback wise. I think probably for the beginning of summer, we should just toss out a poll for suggestions on whatnot, right? Whatnot being just things, just to get some connection. But yeah, subscribe, comment on Instagram and Spotify and YouTube, Apple Podcast, wherever you listen to us. Keep an eye out for the merch giveaway that we are going to do sometime over the summer. Very excited to do another one of those. Maybe we'll make it a little more fun or something. I don't know. It's hard, right?
We should do something with the next merch giveaway. Either the person submits a question for the podcast, they can give us a quote or something they want us to discuss.
Challenge. I think we should challenge somebody to do something.
Well, see, but you want them to be engaged. So, if we do, we've discussed my bone to pick with the ice bucket challenge. But, if you do an ice bucket challenge thing, then people are like, oh, man, I am not doing that for a T-shirt. We're going to have, a couple fanatics do it, so...
Really? I feel like we'd have a ton of people do it for that.
Oh, I don't know.
The ice bucket challenge?
I would say the ice bucket challenge. Yeah. We could make something fun.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
But, and then I had another thing. Oh, yeah. Since we're going to be, the cool thing about summer podcasts and the fact that we're all online and our listeners out there, if you are wanting to be on our podcast, please don't be afraid to ask. Reach out to us. We have the ability over the summer to broadcast you on our podcast from anywhere in the world. So there is no excuse for us about not being where you are, because you can just hop right in and join us on our podcast. So please reach out if you're interested. We love having guests on. It is the coolest part about this podcast is getting able to talk to somebody else. And so it's been awesome actually having guests on for the last 3 weeks, because it's different. We haven't had a ton on this semester, so it's been nice. And like Evan said, I probably will put a poll out at the beginning of the summer to just kind of see if y'all have ideas for the Lost Sheep podcast, quote ideas, or just general concerns, criticisms, anything to help us grow as a podcast. Final thoughts from you guys? Anything else? All right. You good, Evan?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you guys so much for listening. We are the Lost Sheep Podcast. God bless.